Section 1, Subjective Mind. Subsection C, Psychology. Mind, der Geist. Supra-subsection A, Theoretical Mind. Theo is God, and reti is net, and ikal is in reference to. So theoretical is in reference to the net of God, or that which makes you fishers of men. Encyclopedia section 445. Intelligence finds itself determined. This is its apparent aspect from which in its immediacy it starts. But as knowledge, intelligence consists in treating what is found as its own. Its activity has to do with the empty form, the pretense of finding reason, and its aim is to realize its concept or to be reason actual, along with which the content is realized as rational. This activity is cognition. The nominal knowledge, which is only certitude, elevates itself, as reason is concrete, to definite and conceptual knowledge. The course of this elevation is itself rational and consists in a necessary passage governed by the concept of one grade or term of intelligent activity, a so-called faculty of mind, into another. The refutation which such cognition gives of the semblance that the rational is found starts from the certitude or the faith of intelligence in its capability of rational knowledge and in the possibility of being able to appropriate the reason, which it and the content virtually is. The distinction of intelligence from will is often incorrectly taken to mean that each has a fixed and separate existence of its own, as if volition could be without intelligence, or the activity of intelligence could be without will. A host of other phrases used of intelligence and similar belong to a point of view utterly alien to the mental level or to the position of philosophic study. A favorite reflection form is that of powers and faculties of soul, intelligence, or mind. Faculty, like power or force, is the fixed quality of any object of thought, conceived as reflected into itself. Force is no doubt the infinity of form, or the inward and the outward, but its essential finitude involves the indifference of content to form. Isolate the activities, and you similarly make the mind a mere aggregate and treat their essential correlation as an external incident. The action of intelligence as theoretical mind has been called cognition, knowledge. Yet this does not mean intelligence, inter alia, knows, besides which it also intuits, conceives, remembers, imagines, and similar things. The concept or possibility of cognition has come out as intelligence itself, as the certitude of reason. The act of cognition itself is therefore the actuality of intelligence. The stages of its realizing activity are intuition, conception, and memory, and other similar activities. These activities have no other imminent meaning. Their aim is solely the concept of cognition, or that they severally procure a cognitive satisfaction of their own, and that lead to a glorification of the delights of intuition, remembrance, imagination, and that lead to a glorification of the delights of intuition, remembrance, imagination. But the true satisfaction, it is admitted, is only afforded by an intuition permeated by intellect and mind, by rational conception, by products of imagination which are permeated by reason and exhibit ideas, in a word, by cognitive intuition, cognitive conception, and similar activities. The truth ascribed to such satisfaction lies in this, that intuition, conception, and similar activities are not isolated, and exist only as moments in the totality of cognition itself. Section 1, Subjective Mind. Subsection C, Psychology, Mind, der Geist. Super subsection A, theoretical mind. Theo is God and reti is net, and ikal is in reference to. So theoretical is in reference to the net of God, or that which makes you fishers of men. Metasection alpha, intuition, intelligent perception, Anschauung. Encyclopedia section 446. The mind, which as soul is physically conditioned, which as consciousness stands to this condition on the same terms as to an outward object, but which as intelligence finds itself so characterized, is, in for section 1, an articulate embryonic life, in which it is to itself as it were palpable, and has the whole material of its knowledge, in consequence of the immediacy in which it is thus originally. It is in this stage only as an individual and possesses a vulgar subjectivity. It thus appears as mind in the guise of feeling. If feeling formerly turned up, see section 399, as a mode of the soul's existence, if feeling formerly turned up as a mode of the soul's existence, the finding of it, or its immediacy, was in that case essentially to be conceived as a congenital or corporal condition, whereas at present it is only to be taken abstractly in the general sense of immediacy. Encyclopedia section 447. The characteristic form of feeling is that though it is a mode of some affection, this mode, sterling and true, has the form of casual particularity, not to mention that its import may also be the most scanty and most untrue. In the Phenomenology of Mind section, in the Truth of Mind, the mere consciousness point of view, as opposed to true mental idealism, is swallowed up, and the matter of feeling has rather been supposed already and immanent in mind. It is commonly taken for granted that as regards content there is more in feeling than in thought. This being specifically affirmed of moral and religious findings. If a man, and since this is affirmed in moral and religious findings, if you were to program an artificial intelligence, if you could, and you wanted it to think, Almost all of our computers think. But if you wanted it to feel, you would have to offer it degrees of feeling. And would that be touch, taste, smell, hearing? What about heat? So, feeling is more, has more mass than thought. But thought does weigh something. And recently, science has shown information stored on our liquid crystals and solid crystals does have weight. So if you have an empty crystal with all of its matrices and you add information to it, that crystal will weigh more than if it didn't. And if the information you add isn't processing data, numbers, maths, but instructions on feeling, that does weigh more. So when a person feels a particular way and they add feeling to the information they provide, it becomes more weighty, and things that weigh more impact a person or people more. And there's a physical correlation between sentimentality and information versus information on its own. If a man on any topic appeals not to the nature and notion of the thing, or at least to reasons, to the generalities of common sense, but to his feeling, the only thing to do is to let him alone. Because by his behavior he refuses to have any lot or part in common rationality, and shuts himself up in his own isolated subjectivity, his private and particular self. You'll notice in in this outline previously, Hegel has some difficulty with the concept of sovereignty, and it's very likely that Hegel wrote this encyclopedia for a sovereign. And so, this last point here, if a man on any topic appeals not to the nature and notion of a thing, or at least to reasons, to the generalities of common sense, but to his feeling, the only thing to do is to let him alone, because by his behavior he refuses, by his behavior, by his sovereignty, he refuses sentimentality, to have any lot or part in common rationality, and shuts himself up in his own isolated subjectivity, his private and particular self. So for everyone else you appeal to who is not sovereign, feelings and emotions and drives are what will move them and motivate them. A sovereign will feel what you're saying, but has been trained by other sovereigns, or at least by other teachers, to not react to sentimental notions. Uh, Trained to not react isn't that he or she doesn't react to them, but when he or she finds himself reacting to them, uh, he isolates, he becomes isolated within his private and particular self. So you may be, if you are the diplomat speaking to a sovereign, and you ask him, "Don't you see what we're going through?" I would recommend that you have a look at Ecclesiastes, which, though it is attributed to Solomon, King Solomon, son of David, was actually written by his brother, uh, the favorite son of King David, King of Jerusalem, Nathaniel. And he explains how a sovereign appeals back to your sentimentality. I know I live in this giant home that my family built and have plush beds and beautiful food and the best wine and an amazing wife or spouses or harem. But isn't it great that a man, unmarried, sleeps in the bed with another man to stay warm, and one of you stays up and defends the other one when a third one comes in, and then you convince the third one to stay with you? Isn't that better that we have more people in smaller places in our kingdom? And he will overcome you in that respect. So offer a solution. The people are unhappy. Their unhappiness means disorder, and that disorder will lead to your purpose being diminished. I recommend Encyclopedia section 448, Infra section 2. As this immediate finding is broken is as this immediate finding is broken up into elements, we have the one factor in attention, the abstract identical direction of mind, in feeling, as also in all other more advanced developments of it, an act of self collection, the factor of fixing it as our own, but with an as yet only nominal autonomy of intelligence. Apart from such attention, there is nothing for the mind. The other factor is to invest the special quality of feeling, as contrasted with this inwardness of mind, with the character of something existent, but as a negative or as the abstract otherness of itself. Intelligence thus defines the content of sensation as something that is out of itself, projects it into times and space, which are the forms in it. Intelligence thus defines the content of sensations as something that is out of itself, projects it into times and space, which, as the forms in it, is intuitive. To the view of consciousness, the material is only an object of consciousness, a relative other. From mind, it receives the rational characteristic of being its very other. Encyclopedia section